Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to give a shout out even before I begin to my dear friend Eugene Mihai, without whom I wouldn't be here, in this book that I did write 3 or 4 years ago, having retired from Procter & Gamble. But I guess you're saying is out here, folks to buy if they want to, was translated into Romanian, every single word by Eugene, and that is not an easy task. Who am I? Who is this elderly gentleman who's come here to kind of balance out the age as I look around this young group? A few words about my background. I joined Procter & Gamble in 1963. I was convinced I'd be a lawyer. I grew up feeling that was definitely what I wanted to do. I loved studying. I loved analytical work. But having spent 3 years in the Navy, I decided I'd go to work for a company for 1 year. And I remembered the glint in the eye of somebody who was on the campus at Yale, my alma mater. He had a glint in his eye as he talked about something I was selling him an ad for recruiting. And I asked him why he looked so excited, and he told me it was about this wonderful job you could do if you came to Procter & Gamble. I decided I'd go there for 1 year, and I went to the registrar at the law school and asked to be postponed 1 year, and they agreed. And after 6 months, I told them, forget that, and 39 years later, I retired. Life is funny. It's made up of dots that somehow connect. You've already experienced that to a degree. You get to my age, you'll see that it happens more and more. You keep following your nose, pursuing everything you do as well as you can. What I'm going to review here with you today is something I've reviewed with no one other than my family. It's quite personal. Obviously, it comes from an age much older than your own, looking back, and I really have no idea how helpful it will be to you. I'll go through it pretty quickly. I see we've got a clock here. I would like to provide all the time for any questions you have. The way I framed this is, in retrospect, what am I most certain of? In retrospect, and this is something I only wrote within the last year, what am I most certain of? It's a wonderful book written by Marilynne Robinson. I don't know if you've read her. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist and essayist. And she wrote this: when things are taking their ordinary course, it is hard to remember what matters. There are so many things that you would never think to tell anyone. And I believe they may be the things that mean the most to you, and that even your own child would have to know in order to know you well at all. That was my little prefatory comment to what I'll get into. First thing that I know for certain is that my wife and my children were the constant and underlying source of joy, energy, emotional stability, and confidence in my life. My marriage to my wife, Francie, was by far the most important event in my life. I felt after I married her, I just had this feeling I can do anything. There was nothing ever to have to worry about after that. And boy, it did not come easy. The hardest selling job I had in my whole life was getting my wife to marry me. I pursued her for 3 or 4 years in a way which today I probably would have been charged as a stalker. I tried everything. I even dated a roommate in order to try to make her feel jealous, to which she told me, "It's so wonderful you're going out with Susan." And I said, that wasn't my idea. But finally, she agreed. And I simply so, and those of you who have a family or you're married would know this, I've kept a journal for 40 years. And again, that journal makes it crystal clear how the time I spent with my children, and now 8 grandchildren, were really the oxygen that kept me going through the thick and thin of a blessed business career. Second thing I know for sure and most certain of is the debt I owe to other people. I wrote a paper, maybe 10 years ago now, and I titled it, "If It Weren't for Them." If it weren't for them. And all of you could write a paper already if it weren't for them. And I put down on that paper probably 10 or 15 people who I had encountered, past my parents, through a teacher in school where I went away to school and made me stay at Thanksgiving because he said I wasn't doing a good enough job and my room was messy. I had to agree on the latter. I disagreed on the former. To people who believed in me every step of the way, who gave me expectations of myself that I didn't have of myself at a time like that. I would say this to you, you know it already, but I can confirm it from a longer age. You are making differences in people's lives today you don't even know you're making. They will come from comments that are made almost in passing. I can remember the CEO of Procter & Gamble talking to me 15 years before I became the CEO of Procter & Gamble. And you know what it did? He was passing me in the hall. And he said, John, you better take care of yourself because someday you may run this place. That was it, just passing down the hall. I thought, that's pretty amazing. He said that. I couldn't believe it. I was wondering if I'd get promoted into the next job because there were still 3 or 4 steps between that. There were so many times people along the way that did that to me. Special friends and so on. Ed Harness. No reason you know Ed Harness. But I was in Italy in 1974. One of the great blessings in my life and my family's life was that I became the general manager of Procter & Gamble Italy in 1974. It was a terrible time. I mean, we had crisis then, maybe not as bad as today, but inflation was running at 25%. The communists were about to take over. Berlinguer was within 1 point, the Christian Democratic Party. Our business was in terrible shape. We were hardly making any money. And the CEO of Procter & Gamble comes for his first visit to Europe, and he comes to Italy. And I'm giving him a business review, and I'm sure in that business review, he must have seen me as the most uptight person, scared, worried what he was going to say to what I had to report. And I remember this, and mind you, this is 1974. It's over 40 years ago. And we're going down the hall in Via Cavour, outside Rome, and we get to the elevator, and Ed puts his arm on my shoulder, and he's a big, gruff guy, football player before, and he looks at me and he says, John, sometimes you just have to wait for the other shoe to fall. You're doing the right things. Everything will be all right. That's all he said. Did that make me all of a sudden get totally loose and everything? No. But that was an expression of confidence in not a pre-planned way in 30 seconds. And you, if you have people working for you, or people alongside you, or even people you work for, will convey confidence and trust and belief in ways you don't know. And I always say to people at Procter & Gamble, try to act in a way that if somebody 10 years or 20 years from now puts their list together, if it weren't for them, if you're on that list, if it weren't for them, it would be a good thing. Third, I've come to recognize that the greatest gift we give to another person is our trust and our love. It can't be faked. A huge part of conveying trust is simply how one listens. I don't know if you agree with me, but there are all kinds of listening. You probably have different degrees of listening going on in this room right now. There's listening, fake listening. You know, I've got to be listening here. It's a serious conversation. I respect this person, so I'm going to really work at it. I'm going to listen. There's part-time listening. And then there's that listening we experience when we're with a person listening to us, and you know they are hanging on every word. They want to understand it, and they want to engage. And there's all the difference in the world between that kind of listening and something else, and conveying real trust, real caring. I think everything I believe in human relations can be put down to 2 words. And this is a wonderful graphic up here, by the way. I take pictures of that. Everything I believe gets down to one thing. Everyone counts. Everyone. Everyone counts. I long remember being in Johannesburg, and I was visiting our plant. I went to a module, and I was going through a review of it with a black African. Procter & Gamble had recently acquired that plant from another company. It had been 3 years since that had happened. So after I go through the review, which was a great review, all of the performance measures were great, I'm walking down the aisle, and I ask this young African, how do you like it now since Procter & Gamble took over the plant? And he said, we really like it. He said it with real enthusiasm. And I said, why are you so enthusiastic? He said, because before, nobody would have asked me that question. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it hit me right here. The simple fact of asking a question, conveying a meaning that somebody counts. Well, all of us want to know we count, right? We want to know that we matter. And the relationship somebody else has to us shows we matter. All of us have different levels of self-doubt. Maybe some, most have none. I don't know people like that. Steve Jobs didn't have a lot. but most everybody has vulnerabilities. A short story at Yale, I was up there in charge of all the facilities. And just as you were hearing about Mihai on the dishwashing, I spent a lot of time in all our dining rooms getting to know those people who were handling the food and everything, because I know, one, they should be respected, and two, I learned things from them. But we also had a golf course out there that had been shambles, and they were going to outsource it from the union. I said, no, you're not. Not when I get up here, and my whole purpose is to seal the relationship of union and management. Well, they said, no, it won't work. They don't do the work well. I said, well, we're going to try again. So to cut a long story short, a golf course that had originally been number one in the country, rated among college courses, had fallen to 75th. And it came back to number 2 in 2 years as these wonderful people did their work. I go out and I talk to the foreman out there, big guy, no BS. And I asked him, how's it going out here? And he said, really great, really great. We had put in a new boss because the previous boss had been a control freak. Never listened to anybody. And I asked him, why are you so happy about your new boss? And you know what he said? 2 things. He said, one, he knows how to grow grass. It's important on a golf course to grow grass. And second, he listens to us. Fourth, I won't say a lot on this, but I couldn't complete a list like this without saying it. My faith has played an important, enormous, irreplaceable role in my life. When I go to church, the one thing I pray for is the wisdom to know the right thing to do, and the courage and the perseverance to do it. 5, I've learned that everybody, including me certainly, combines self-centered instincts and noble instincts. None of us are saints. All I can do and what I must do and what I'm sure you try to do is the best we can to fulfill our responsibilities and help other people whose lives we touch do the same. I am reminded again and again of the saying of Rabbi Tarfon, you are not required to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. You're not required to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. You can imagine at my age, I think a lot about that. And I think about it particularly in terms of childhood development in the United States, where we have an absolutely atrocious situation where a third of our population, children, are not growing up with the support, every opportunity that every child deserves, and we can do a lot about it. And while we're not going to eliminate poverty, we're not going to have every child receive the opportunity probably that my grandchildren do because of their position. We've got to provide opportunity to the limit of our ability so every child can develop and use his or her God-given abilities. I've been awestruck by the power of individual leadership. We saw a wonderful example of it here with that young man in his socks. At every level I've ever seen, whether it's running a country, whether it's running a company, whether it's a startup entrepreneurship, which you saw that's the fabric of what's built this country here in Romania. That's the fabric of what's built things everywhere. I've seen that in Disney, of course. I've seen it in the Navy, the captain that I learned from, and so many more. I've been deeply impressed by the common qualities shared by the greatest leaders I've ever known. And these are those qualities, and we saw every one of them in the young man who was here a few moments ago. 1, the love of what they do. They love it. It is passionate. Their vision of excellence and their commitment to it. They won't give up. My favorite little talk of Winston Churchill, he gave right after he was thrown out of office, the end of World War II, and he came back to his prep school, and he put his glasses over his nose, and he said this to the audience: never, 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 never give up. And that was the end of his talk. And he sat down, and initially people would think, oh boy, I thought we were going to get more than that. But then as they reflected on it, they realized they had heard a summation, because there was a lot of opportunities to give up along that path. Beyond that, every one of them has been characterized by their integrity. The thing I've said to people who work for me, if I can just convey one thing to you, it is this: tell me what you think and act on what you believe to be true. We had a we had a plant manager, a wonderful one, giving an orientation session to a young woman, just came off college campus. And he said, I have something I want to say to you, and it's so important, I want you to stitch it on the inside of your eyelid. By this point, you can imagine he had her attention. And I want you to have it on the inside of your eyelid because if you ever forget what I'm about to say, you'll remember it. He said, what I want to ask you to write there is do what you think is right. He said, you'll hear about a lot of policies, you'll hear about a lot of procedures here, but what I'm asking you to do, what I'm expecting you to do, is take all the knowledge you can get and combine it with your best judgment and do what you think is right. Priceless advice. The other quality that every great leader has, and this was discussed right here, is they have an enormous respect for themselves, even when they have self-doubts, and respect for other people. And they have an incredible zest to continue to learn. Their curiosity is unquenchable. I've learned that the greatest thing that we'll leave behind is the influence that we have on others, most importantly, our family. We exert this influence not so much by what we've said, some by what we've done, but above all, by how we've made other people feel, by how we've made them feel. If you think back to the experiences you've had today, you can remember, would bet anything they relate to how someone made you feel. It's the example we set by being our best selves that has the potential to lift people up and inspire them to be their best and overcome challenges that everyone has in the journey of life. My life has confirmed how trapped we can be by the memories of our childhood. And certainly in areas I've been trapped by the memories of my childhood. But I found that hard work, and you never totally get over them. And having the benefit of great relationships, as I've certainly had, you can go pretty far in doing it. I've seen the importance of continued learning and how achieving that learning depends on our having new experiences, meeting people who are different than we are, reading books outside our particular area of professional interest. I've come to recognize that even for the most fortunate, like me, life brings its share of disappointments, adventures which just don't work out the way we had hoped. It's important that we learn from them and not let them get us down. I've gone to bed many times, and I'll bet each of you have, feeling pretty depressed. It's not been a real happy day. But I say to myself every morning, I'm waking up, and I've got a choice. Am I going to approach this day positively or not? That's my choice. And to go be around grumpy very long, and I've seen, produces no good. Next to final, I've come to see the importance of staying true to what one believes in and not losing face or losing confidence in the face of criticism. All of you will be pursuing things that are different in whatever organization you're in. They'll challenge the status quo. They'll be going against the grain. Your first reaction to a proposal will be, we don't do that. We tried that before. And these are moments of truth where you learn, can the idea be presented better? But there are also moments of truth that you may be on the singular thing that needs to happen. And if your experience is like mine at Procter & Gamble, you may have to push on that 3, 4, and 5 times in order to make it happen. And don't stop, as they say, don't stop now if you really believe in it. I've learned a lot from history on this, and you have too. Well, Abraham Lincoln could have given up many times in that war, losing the battles, losing 2 sons in the course of the war. Churchill, in the moments of the worst time, in 1942, the Germans were surrounding Stalingrad. The U.S. Navy had been wiped out at Pearl Harbor. British were being routed in the desert at Alamein. In February of 1942, Churchill gets before the British people and he says, we didn't come this far because we're made of sugar candy. We didn't come this far because we're made of sugar candy. And that's the only kind of perseverance I've seen that can overcome challenges. And that's been through in my life. Entering Southeastern Europe, entering Russia at the time we did, was challenged within our company by important people, including Dick Cheney, who was on the board at that time. Establishing gay rights in Procter & Gamble back in 1995 was somewhat controversial, but they seemed absolutely right, and we pursued them. finally, and quite remarkably, I'm actually on time. I mean, I can't believe this. And finally, and again, thinking of things that I'm most certain of, and that is I've tried to honor what I always took as my two most important mandates: to be of service to others, starting with those closest to me, my family, to stand up for and do my best to achieve what I believed was right. So thank you. This is something that I go over with an audience really beyond my family, and I've never even shared this with all my family, but as I was thinking about what you wanted me to do, I thought I would risk having your indulgence and having me go through it. So I'd welcome, obviously, any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here with us today. Are there any questions from the room? Oh, Mihaela?
Mihaela Popescu, Progressiv magazine. First of all, I want to thank you for this excellent closure of the conference day. It was really inspirational for me personally, and I think for everybody in the room. And you said something very interesting, that the most precious gift that we can give to a person is the trust. And I want to ask you, how do you choose the persons who really deserve your trust? How do you make sure they would not use your trust in a wrong way, in their own purposes, not the common purposes? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I start out very optimistically and positively. I start out giving the person the benefit of the doubt. I think the thing that would undercut my trust in a person is I thought they were being dishonest with me. If I thought they were being two-faced, if they were saying something to somebody else and not to me. I happen to be in an amazing company, Procter & Gamble, and when you're at Yale, and and that doesn't happen often, but it did happen to me 2 or 3 times. And being a glass half full person and wanting to concede the benefit, I've sometimes been fooled for some time, and it's been rather crushing. I mean, you get over it, you got to get over it, but somebody who you thought was telling you what they thought and was really working with you, and you find out, no, they were saying something else, and I go to them and say, why didn't you tell me that? Why didn't you have that conversation? That's really the one thing that would do it, But I think if you start out, it's easy to have lower trust in somebody, but you really haven't understood them yet and taken the time to understand them as an individual. And I think it's really important, what is the going in position? And I'll get fooled sometimes, but I'd rather get fooled sometime than lose the advantage of starting out with the basic attitude that everybody's trying to do a good job. People want to be honest, and that I'll proceed on that and sometimes accept the disappointment. Yeah.
I have also one curiosity. You said that you kept a journal for 40 years. It's not a common thing here in Romania. Do you have a journal? No. What made you keep a journal?
Yeah, I think it was mainly there were so many things going on that I wanted to record. But I thought it would be self-instructive by putting down those things that were going on that I felt good about. I'll put in there things from a biography I read that really turned me on, things that I wished I'd done better. So I think one was recorded because it was interesting. 2, maybe more personally, it was really more about self-instruction. Mm-hmm. I'd say it was that.
Would you recommend to a manager to keep a journal? It's a good
exercise? I don't know. I mean, that's such a personal thing. Okay. I started and stopped a journal for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, I bet some of you started journals. All of us have started journals and then stopped because it kind of gets boring and you have other stuff to do. And you wonder if it's worth the time. But, I think it is very important. I can only speak from my own experience to be recording these things that went well and didn't go well. And I've always been talking. Each year I always put together a set of priorities. We didn't get to talk it, but my 3 North Stars are service, leadership, and growth. Those are what I try. How do I best be of service to those I can serve? And that sounds very mechanical, mm-hmm. I know, but I think of it. In leadership, how can I do the best I can? And feeling you're always growing. And it's been helpful. It's been helpful. Boy, is it long now and boring. Nobody will ever read it. And anyway, my handwriting's so terrible, nobody could.
Maybe that's good.
Huh?
Today they call it phrasing.
That's right. I guess they do.
You have been around the block, so to say, a lot of time now. Do you see this big change that everybody talks about in the world? What is the biggest change that you see now in the world?
I mean, from the time of my career?
Yeah.
Oh, I think how we're all interacting together is huge. The appreciation of diversity is enormously changed. The biggest change in Procter & Gamble in my whole career was the diversity. I hired the first full-time woman into marketing. We had our first vice president, who was a woman, in Procter & Gamble in 1993. We now have 51. That's at last count. We have half of our presidents are women. That wouldn't have happened. We had no one outside of North America on our senior leadership team. When I joined the company today, more than half of the senior leadership team, which is 356 people or so, more than half are non-U.S. We have, 50 Romanians who joined the company here are now working outside Romania, doing business in other places. So that's huge. Of course, technology, I think, has come into our lives and disrupted it in many ways. I thought at one time technology would open up space in our lives and so on. It's not done that, right? I mean, it's ever present. We fight harder to have free moments. I was with some students earlier today. One thing I said to the students, I'd say to you and to myself, is make sure you take your vacations and take long weekends, because if you're like me, your best ideas will come not while you're sitting at a desk grinding away, but they'll come when you actually have some free space in your life to think about the future, maybe not just business, but your family and whatever else you're going to do, and to take that time and not allow the ever-present computer and iPhone and everything else, which is a challenge for me. The Facebooks can become a disease. It is.
Do you have a
it is. And
Facebook
I'll
account?
I'll probably go back tonight and go on Facebook to see how many likes we got on one of our pictures.
Oh, there are more questions in
There's
the
a
room.
question there.
Microfon în spate? One moment.
Diana Mereu, GSK. Thank you very much for your inspirational speech.
Where are you?
Here.
Thank you. Okay.
Please stand.
Okay, so thank you very much for your inspirational speech about trust, about passion, about what you did, and about commitment. You mentioned earlier, so you covered a little bit of my question. How did you manage to balance your life and work while being a CEO for a big company like P&G?
When I'm asked that question, I often am. I think I really should have my wife here to respond to my response. The first thing I'd have to say, we had 4 children. I may have mentioned 8 grandchildren, and they came quite close together. And when we were traveling to in Italy, they were 5, 4, and 8 months, the 3 boys, and Susan, my daughter, came later. I can't tell you how much of the load my wife carried, is a frank point, moving this along. I think the key to doing it the way we did is we had privileged times that we always spent together. We would never not be all together for at least a month during the summer. We would always be together between Christmas and New Year's. I would never fail to go to a sports event because it was so much fun. I'd miss a lot of teacher conferences that my wife would be going to. I told the students today that a group at P&G asked me how my children felt I was as a father. And they said they didn't want my answer, they wanted my children's answer. So I sent my 4 children an email. I sent them their email, and I said, all right, you need to speak up. Now, this only happened about 10 years ago. So I said, I need emails from each of you with an honest answer of how I was as a father. I was a little worried what I'd hear. And so the first one comes back. That's my middle son, David. And he writes back in his email, Dad, you did all right, period. Well, I called him on the phone and I said, David, we've been together at that time 35 years. I deserve a better answer than that. I want something more substantive. He said, Dad, it was a simple question and it doesn't deserve anything more than a simple answer. You know how kids are. You have kids, how they kind of treat you these days. But he did go on. I said, I need more than that. And he went on. He said, well, you were pretty good. And then he said, this was not so good. You wouldn't have been around even as much as you were if you'd been a Wall Street lawyer. So next comes my oldest son. I'll get through this quickly. My oldest son says, Dad, if you measured it just in terms of time, you weren't there an enormous amount. But he said what made a difference to us was the quality of the time you spent with us. Because when you were there, you were always really there. And of course, I always was. We always came to dinner. I had dinner with them every night, but when they were like 1 to 10. And then when they got to be 5 and 6, I always did puzzles with them at the dining room table with salt shakers and pepper shakers. And we did, you know, mathematical things to see how they would work. My daughter, who always has been the last, she's so careful. She hadn't submitted it. It was only a day to go. I said, Susie, I have to have your answer. And she asked, what did the boys say? So I told them that, and she said, I picked that one. And that was it. I don't know. I feel really great about them today. They are really great, the way they've grown up. And you know, what do you want? And you know, a child grows up, 1, they're happily married. 2, they each have children. 3, they're good people. They've had challenges in their career every step of the way. My son's a politician. He's lost 3 elections. He's won 3 elections. My oldest son, he's had some challenges in his business, but they're just good people. And we're still as close as we could be. You know, it's wonderful. I don't know how many of you have children that have gotten to be in their 20s. Not many looking at you. But it's really wonderful if your children, they're always your children. But my children have become my best friends. And people sometimes say, where would you really like to be? And my answer is, I want to be anywhere where my wife and my children are. That's where I want to be. There's nothing else that would have me want to be somewhere else than there. And that I feel really good about. Thank you.
Lucian, I know
Thank
you
you.
have a question.
In fact, I wrote down 6 questions.
Oh.
And because we need to prioritize, I already have the answer for 4. I have only 2 left.
That's good.
Thank you to Mihai and to Tika. You are the speakers that I have seen. And thank to Magazine Progresiv for this beautiful afternoon. It is really inspiring. Thank you very much. The question that I have first, it's helpful for me. I don't know if it's helpful for the other ones. Could you please give me your definition of a good strategy, business strategy?
What is the definition of a good strategy?
Yes. And then I'll have the second.
Well, don't let that go out of my mind. So let me try to answer that before you come back to the other one. A good strategy is one that is based on capability, true capability you can deliver, that is truly choiceful. The problem with many strategies, many that I've been involved in, is they aren't choiceful enough. They don't really provide the basis for sustained advantage versus competition, sustained advantage in fulfilling the desire of the consumer. A great strategy I'll just mention as an example is that Walt Disney, when Bob Iger came in to taking over from Michael Eisner, if you said to Bob, you only can have one strategy, it would be to get more creative content for Disney to be able to develop into all the different venues they do, film, games, parks, and so on. And his number one strategy was to get more creative content for Disney, from which proceeded the acquisition of Pixar, the acquisition of Marvel, and the acquisition of George Lucas Films. Now, what did that strategy have that would meet the test of a good strategy? 1, it was very robust. It was one that Disney really could make good on, given their capabilities. 3, it had the opportunity for sustained value giving, that you would, by getting that creative content, be able to continue to develop it, as indicated by Avengers 2 coming out this Friday, and Frozen 2 already in production. By the way, just a digression, how many of you have seen Frozen? For those of you who haven't, I am doing you the favor, coming away from this conference, of giving you something that will bring you great joy. Watch Frozen. Okay, is that okay on that strategy? Robust, deliverable, differentiated value, and sustainable. You had another question?
Use the mic, please, Lucian.
You have announced I wrote 5 leadership skills. And let's imagine that you would have to choose the next CEO of Procter & Gamble. Which one of the 5 will make the difference between 2 people having excellent 5 skills that you have mentioned?
Which of the 5
will make the difference? Love what you do.
Are you getting 5 from my book or what? Where'd you get the 5?
I have the love of what you do,
What?
vision of excellence, integrity, respect for yourself and others, and curiosity. This is what I wrote down during your speech.
Huh?
Qualities of a good leader. You have to choose the next CEO of P&G, which would be the single one.
He took the takeaways from your
Well,
presentation.
yeah, no, thank you. That's great. You read it. This is
I was following.
Because they will quote you for that.
yeah.
Don't say names.
No, I'm not going to put it in a context there. It is so hard to just pick one. If you are failing in strategic ability and being able to pick the right strategies, you're dead. If you don't have a climate in P&G, one of the great strengths of P&G that is differentiating truly is the sense of community and family we have as a company. I won't say it's totally unique, but it's very unusual. And the CEO of Procter & Gamble, as it's been the case, has to be able to maintain that. You know, those 5 qualities people have at different levels. Nobody's got them all at the same level. But you've got to have them I happen to know who the candidates are to be the next CEO of P&G, and they will have them all at a very high level. I know that's a bit of a cop-out on your question, but that's it.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have one here.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to ask a question. I think this might work somehow.
Could we bring another one? And this is the last question because we have a timeline.
I will try to make it very precisely and very concise that save time of everyone. Thank you very much for the kind and very wise words that we just listened today. And I will have a question because you talk about instinct and knowledge. How do you harmonize these 2 instances, which are very important? Because instinct is something that it's a feeling, it's the sixth sense or somehow, and knowledge it's something more related to the left hemisphere, it's accumulated information, interconnecting communication and using as a tool. How do you harmonize these 2 instances, instinct and knowledge? Where is the border?
Well, of course, it's the classic question you raise. Becomes terribly situational. I mean, a decision on how fast and how much you're going to invest has knowledge and instinct. I'll give you one example. We faced a decision in Procter & Gamble that goes back to the mid-20th century, which was how fast and how much money should we commit to developing a whole revolutionary technology in laundry detergents. And we had found one that was going to obsolete soaps. And the question was, and we knew that was knowledge. The question was, how big would it be and how much money should we commit in advance of firm knowledge of how big it would be? And the choice was to go ahead, as we eventually did, and build 4 plants before we had our first test market at a capital cost then equivalent to 5% of our annual sales. And the benefit of doing that, if it worked, was we knew we would have a 2 to 3 year lead on any competitor. That was one position. The other position was that is a risk much too great to take. The instinct there came in the confidence that one had and how big it would be based on the consumer reaction we'd seen. We knew it was strong. And the other was, the instinct was, how important was the first mover advantage? How important was the first mover advantage? It was a bold decision. Countless other decisions are like that. What became the technology that created the entire hair care industry that exists not just in P&G, but throughout all of industry, in terms of knowledge, was a very small advantage with consumers, 53-47. But there was the instinct that when used, and in use with good marketing, that it could be huge. There was strong resistance even putting it in the market. And someone came to then the CEO of the company, and you know what they said? I want you to trust me. This can be really big. Go to the market. And sometimes that point, and I could give other examples, where you'll need to go to someone and say, I want you to trust me. That's a bold thing to say. I want you to trust me. I think this can work. And it may be a hard thing to say to somebody, I want you to trust me. But that is the way that we ended up going to market with that. We would not have our paper business if somebody hadn't come and said, at a time when we said, no more money, no more money, no more money. And that person said to the CEO, John, I want you to trust me. We can make this work. Don't stop now. Those are the literal words. I was in the room. Trust me, we can make this work. Don't stop now. We signed the check, on we went, and it worked. Now, every time it won't. Every time it won't. And I've often said, you know, if you don't have failures, you know you're not reaching far enough. You don't have failures, not reaching far enough. That's the way it is. And then the innovation, you've just got to have paths to that. That's another subject we probably don't have the time to get into.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a
Thank
lot.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you once again, Wave Division, for this opportunity.